President, and allow me also to thank Assistant Secretary General Khayari for his briefing on the report of the Secretary General on the implementation, or rather on the breach and the continuous breach of Resolution 2334. This report shows two important things. The first one is that the killing and the mass displacement of Palestinians is also ongoing in the West Bank, as well as decolonization and annexation of Palestinian land. Second, it shows the price of not holding those who breach the resolutions of this Council accountable, and how that allows for the perpetuation of crimes and illegal actions to this day. There's a condemnation of settlements that has been going on now for 60 years, and the settlement activities continue to this day because of that lack of accountability. Allow me to start by saying there is a consensus around the need for a ceasefire, the release of hostages and prisoners, the delivery of humanitarian aid, and the withdrawal of Israeli forces. But what happens in the meantime, while the mediation of efforts of the United States, of Qatar, of Egypt continue? We reject the idea that there is a right to slaughter Palestinians. That was our position from day one. This is day 632, and the slaughter is ongoing. There is nothing that can justify a genocide. A nation is fighting for its survival, faced with an existential threat. What Palestinians want is to see their children grow, with no agony and no death, refusing that the only horizon that is available to them is the shroud of death or the shackles of oppression. There are still some who wonder very publicly if we do even exist, or recognize our right to existence simply to justify killing us. There are still some to wonder if we are entitled to find life and freedom in our land. There are still some who treat us as a burden, as expendable, as parasites, as a people too many, as having deserved to be killed and maimed. That dehumanization, that denial of our rights, that demonization of Palestinians reached its ultimate expression in Gaza, where the genocide continues as we speak and meet again and again and again. And while the whole world stands with Gaza, and we recognize this solidarity in all of your countries that we see every day, Gaza stands alone. And Gaza will continue standing alone for as long as the genocide continues. The decisions to hold those responsible accountable, to deter the continued commission of crimes, to ensure the killing stops and aid flows in a dignified manner throughout the Gaza Strip, cannot be deferred any longer. Every day, 100 Palestinian civilians are killed. Every single day, 100 Palestinians are killed in tents, in the streets, and while trying to provide food for their families. They are bombed, shot at, confronted with occupation-made famine and occupation-made thirst as weapons of war, and the obliteration of all the requirements of life in Gaza, from homes to hospitals, as their lives and their limbs are taken away day after day after day. And now aid is being used to torment our people, to squeeze them in 16% of the Gaza Strip. Gaza was the most densely populated area on earth, with over 2 million people living in the Gaza Strip. They now are squeezed on 16% of that area, to render them more desperate, to force them to leave their land. We are no different than the nations represented here, who achieved their independence and took their rightful place among the community of nations. We are entitled to life. We are entitled to freedom. We are entitled to security. And we are entitled to our independent state. There is something unbearable and honestly a bit humiliating about having to proclaim over and over again that we are part of humanity and that we should be treated as human beings. Palestinians were not born to live their lives under foreign occupation or to endure repeatedly death and destruction, displacement and dispossession. That is not our fate. We are no lesser beings than those who claim these rights for themselves around the world and across history, who proclaim this self-evident truth that all people are created and remain equal, that they are endowed with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and dignity. For those who contest our right to our independent state in our land, what are they proposing? A one-state solution between the river and the sea, with equal rights for all, with everyone enjoying the right to vote and able to exercise their political and human rights? I doubt that's their intention, given the overwhelming evidence to the contrary. So what are they proposing? There are only three options left: genocide, ethnic cleansing, or apartheid, or a combination of all three. The destruction and removal of a nation by force, or the continued subjugation of a people. This is horrible and unacceptable, and it is what we are witnessing before our very eyes. There should be consensus against these criminal options. But when it comes to the Palestinian people, it is better to check. We have an experience when it comes to us to see people justify the unjustifiable. Therefore, there is no viable solution without an independent and sovereign state of Palestine, with East Jerusalem as its capital, living side by side with Israel in peace and security. We are not saying that while there is calm, while our people are thriving and living their lives, we are still speaking of the two-state solution, living side by side with Israel, while the Israeli government is attempting to annihilate our nation. The two-state solution on the 1967 borders, the world rallied around and demanded the parties to accept. One does. What about the other? In a two-state solution, there are no negotiations, no debate, no conditions over the existence of either state. Neither side has a veto right over the existence of the other. That is the premise of that solution. Palestine recognized Israel over 30 years ago and still awaits Israel's recognition of Palestine. Israel demands that we recognize not only its existence, but its right to exist, something specific to Israel, its right to exist, while it arrogates to itself the right to veto our state and deny our very existence as a nation. In fact, Israel not only claims this veto right over Palestinian statehood, or raises condition after condition to make it impossible, it actively pursues the destruction of that state and the displacement of our people. Some suggest that the solution would be for Palestinian statehood to be adjusted to accommodate Israel's illegal actions, effectively ensuring the perpetuation of the occupation instead of ending it. You know what a state is. Sovereignty is a corollary of statehood. They are inextricably linked. Independence is freedom from foreign occupation and domination in all its manifestations. And we are entitled to sovereignty and security too. Madam President, Netanyahu held a map in the General Assembly in September 2023 about his vision for the new Middle East. In that map, Palestine had disappeared altogether. Israel, from the river to the sea, not a slogan as the one that upsets Israel so much, a reality that its occupation forces, its bulldozers, its settlers, its settlements are trying to build through violence. On the ground, every day there is a new massacre. Palestinian cities and towns look like an archipelago in an ocean of Israeli settlements, enclosed military zones, as communities are confronted with a shrinking space delineated by occupation forces and settlers' attacks, by illegal military orders and illegitimate measures, as if they were drowning under this constant violence and pressure. From Masafir Yatta to Kafr Malik, to Taibe and Der Dewan, from Jerusalem to Jenin, from Nablus and Tul Karam, from Tubas to Bethlehem and Al Khalil, everywhere Palestinians confined, fragmented, suffocating under this occupation. Under the pretext of ensuring the security of the occupying power, Israel is threatening the very survival of the occupied people. The only way forward is ending the occupation and the violence once and for all. Palestine is committed to nonviolence in words and deeds. It condemned attacks against all civilians without distinction, Palestinians and Israelis. It reaffirmed its commitment to the two-state solution on the basis of the relevant UN resolutions and the Arab Peace Initiative. It was ready to cooperate fully and still is with the International Conference on the Peaceful Settlement of the Question of Palestine and the implementation of the two-state solution, co-chaired by Saudi Arabia and France. And it started by spelling out its commitments in a letter of President Abbas to President Macron and to the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And we are acting upon these commitments. But we also have rights that need to be upheld, and that is what the letter affirmed as well. We implemented reforms exceeding expectations in impossible circumstances. You know, we are asked to do a lot, and we are saying we are ready to assume all our responsibilities, including in the Gaza Strip, to ensure sole governance and security responsibilities, to have a monopoly over governance and weapons. And we are being denied our ability to do that, to deliver to our people by Israel. You have to help us get rid of the shockhold that Israel has over us, politically, militarily, physically, and financially. Imagine a government that would have to deal with daily incursions by a foreign force, by forces and settlers, into their towns and cities, day after day. Imagine if your resources were being stolen, your natural resources and your money. Israel is withholding $2.3 billion of Palestinian revenues. That means that we have been unable to pay to most of our public employees the equivalent of several months of salaries. Imagine in your countries if you didn't pay for 1 month the salaries of your public employees, what would happen? You know what Palestinian civil servants are doing? They are showing up, despite that, to deliver to their people. We are doing the impossible, in impossible circumstances, and Israel wants to make sure we fail. It will eventually regret it if it was to succeed, but you have a duty to ensure we do not fail. We succeed for the Palestinian people and their rights, but also for the prospects of peace in our region. We accepted every international mechanism, every verification. We ask you to come and check that we are upholding our obligations, as long as you are ready to check in parallel that Israel is upholding its obligations. We have called for the deployment of forces to ensure a ceasefire is respected under a UN mandate and upon the invitation of the Palestinian side, to protect the Palestinian people and to ensure the security for all with regional and international forces. There is a plan There is a plan today, an Arab OIC plan supported by the whole world that would allow to bring this situation to an end, to start the recovery process in Gaza, to rebuild Gaza while the Palestinians remain in it. Israel is undermining all these efforts, the international efforts, the regional efforts, the Palestinian efforts. None of these decisions we are making are easy, especially when Israel is sparing no effort to destroy our state and to harm our people. I urge you not to take us for granted, not to take these decisions for granted. I urge you to help us demonstrate to our people that there is a peaceful path to liberation. If they lose that hope, you cannot imagine the reverberations. We need to demonstrate that there's a peaceful path to liberation. Israel wants to convince them that there's no path to liberation because it believes they will then disappear, either by being killed or being displaced. That is a horrible bet, that is an inhumane bet, and that is a crazy bet that endangers the security of everyone. And it cannot be allowed to continue. Calls for ending the killing in Gaza, ending colonization, upholding international law and the relevant UN resolutions must be accompanied by actions that allow the achievements of these goals, including in line with the determination of the International Court of Justice. We are asked to restate and prove every single day our commitment to nonviolence and the two-state solution, while the other side is unleashing brutal violence against our people and is destroying the two-state solution. There is nothing that will allow to justify the double standards of demanding Palestinian pacifism while justifying, fueling, or even tolerating Israeli militarism. That is not the way forward. There's always a way to justify violence, but the only way forward for the benefit of all is to break the cycle of violence. There's a Palestinian leader from Jerusalem who was an icon of the nonviolent Palestinian struggle called Faisal al-Husseini. And in an attempt to convince the people of why the nonviolence way was the right way, he used a metaphor. He said, I can challenge Muhammad Ali Clay or Mike Tyson and defeat him, but not in a boxing ring, around a chess set. And this image, which had an impact on me and many Palestinians, made sense, made a lot of sense. However, imagine what would happen if you sit around that chess set and you're on the verge of winning, achieving liberation, and Mike Tyson would stand up and knock out Faisal al-Husseini. And Faisal al-Husseini would rise, as he has done in real life, after being beaten time and time again in Jerusalem, in the streets of Jerusalem, and would put the chess set forward and say, let's try again. And as soon as he was going to win, Mike Tyson would rise again and knock him out again. Don't you think that some of the people observing this scene would say, why doesn't he swing at him? Even if it sounds crazy given the asymmetry of power. But there's one way to prove that Faisal al-Husseini is right, by upholding the rules, by preventing that violence from taking place, by not allowing one side to knock out the other side, time and time again. That is the way that we preserve life. That is the way that you ensure security. There's no Israeli security at the expense of Palestinian life and Palestinian rights. There is shared security, shared life. And the sad reality is, as part of this dehumanization of Palestinians, is once the slaughter is over, and it has to be over, there's an expectation that Palestinians should move on, regardless of the lives lost, of the limbs lost, of the loved ones lost, regardless that their lives were turned into ruins, that every inch of Gaza has witnessed tragedies and methodic devastation. There's an expectation that parents will walk the earth with the shadow of their killed children and do nothing about it. The children who were orphaned will hold on to the memory of their parents, but not to the anger over how they were killed. There's an expectation that a nation will be able to move on from the reality of parents carrying their children in plastic bags, of families buried under the rubble or the sand, or in the tents they found shelter in after everything else was destroyed. That we will be able to move on as a nation from the images of burning children, of starving infants, of the impact that bombs left behind on the lives of many Palestinians, on their scarred bodies, in their hearts and minds, of the impact that a single bullet lodged in the child's head or heart has over an entire family forever. We said long ago we made a choice to seek justice, not vengeance. Justice, not vengeance. But we cannot be prevented from seeking either. We cannot continue to be denied our right to life, to liberty, to dignity. We cannot be denied recourse and reparation. No one has a rightful claim to supremacy, to exceptionalism, to domination, to oppression. No one. Justice is the only way forward and the only viable path to peace. And we are still pursuing peace, despite everything that was done to us. How many times have we heard the claim that the Middle East was one war away from peace, only as a prelude to another war and another war? How many times did we hear the claim that the Palestinian question no longer mattered or was finally put to rest? No one should succumb to these lies and illusions any longer. They cost lives, and we have already lost way too many lives. A different reality is possible for Palestine, for Israel, and for the region. A reality of shared peace, security, and prosperity. It starts with ending the genocide, releasing hostages and prisoners, delivering humanitarian aid, and the full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. It starts from putting an end to the annexation of our land and the displacement of our people. And it will materialize with the independence of the state of Palestine. Shared security will be achieved by the fulfillment of our inalienable rights, not their continued denial. There is not a people too many in the Middle East. There is an independent state missing. We ask for nothing more than what international law has determined as our rights, at par with other peoples around the world, but we will accept nothing less. Our freedom can no longer be denied or delayed. And I thank you, Madam President.